What if I told you there's only one chord progression you need to know as an improvising musician? It doesn't matter what genre you play, jazz, pop, Ibiza club classics, you can ignore pretty much all other music theory. As long as you can solo over these changes, you're set for life. So let's go over what this chord sequence is and why you don't actually need anything else. Now, I'm sure that any jazzers out there have probably already guessed what it is, but in case you haven't, here's a hint. It's one of the most common progressions in all of Western music. That's right, it's the 2-5-1 progression. Now, I'm not exactly the first person to make a video on this, so I don't want to spend ages going over what a 2-5-1 actually is, but here's a quick summary in 30 seconds or less. Let's go. Basically, whatever key you're in, you go to the second note in that scale and build a chord off of that note, making sure you're only using notes that are in our original key. So if I'm in C major, D is the second note of my scale, and I build a chord off of that, which gives me a D minor 7. And it's called a 2 chord because it's built off the second note in the scale. And then you go to the 5th note in the scale, so in this case G, and do the same thing, which gives us G7 for our 5 chord, and do the same thing on the first note, so here it's C, and that gives us C major 7 as our 1 chord. So overall, we have D minor 7, G7, and then C major 7. And that's it. Was that in the time limit? Now I know what you're thinking, there are loads of other chord progressions and variations. Surely you can't get away with just knowing how to solo over this one sequence. Well, to be honest, you pretty much can. I mean, if you're playing jazz, these changes are pretty much everywhere. Pick any random standard and you're almost guaranteed to find a whole bunch of 2-5-1s. Autumn Leaves is almost entirely made up of them. It starts off with a 2-5-1 in B flat major, and then it goes to one in G minor, and the B section switches that round, and the C section adds in a few harmonic embellishments, but it's basically just a whole bunch of 2-5-1s. Even the internet's most feared standard, Giant Steps, is just a bunch of 2-5-1s and 5-1s in a few different keys. But what if you're playing pop? Well, to be honest, they're pretty much just as common. Stevie Wonder's Isn't She Lovely is absolutely full of them. And fine, that song is almost 50 years old, and my music tastes are staying just as relevant as ever. But even more modern songs use them just as much. Miley Cyrus's Flowers, for example, goes A minor, D minor, G, C throughout most of the song. And that D minor, G, C, well, that's just a 2-5-1. Get that down, and you're set for soloing over this song. Now, I'm sure some of you are already in the comments letting me know that not every single chord progression is or has a 2-5-1. And you're right. There are loads of other common chord progressions. We've got 3-6-2-5s, progressions that use chord 4, backdoor 2-5s, vamps, and loads of others. But here's the thing. All of those you can treat like a nice and simple 2-5-1. Let's take a 3-6-2-5 progression, like at the end of Charlie Parker's Ornithology. Now, in the key of G, we've got B minor 7, E7, A minor 7, D7, and then G major 7. Now that last bit, A minor 7, D7, G major 7, that's a 2-5-1 in G major, right? So I hopefully don't have to explain why knowing 2-5-1s is helpful for that bit. But the first 2 chords aren't a 2-5-1, so why is it relevant there? Well, the thing is, they kind of are. So the first 3 chords are B minor 7, E7, A minor 7. But that B minor 7, E7, that's just a 2-5 that wants to go to A major 7. And all it does here is rather than going to the major, it goes to the minor, so then that what you want to be a 1 chord becomes the 2 of the next 2/5. So our 3/6/2/5 is actually just a 2, 5, then down a tone for another 2, 5, going to a 1. But what if you're trying to solo over songs like Lewis Capaldi's Before You Go, which use chord 4 loads? Well, the chords in this song are E flat, C minor, A flat, then we've got a B flat sus, going to a B flat. So we're in the key of E flat, and if we're using numbers, we get 1, then chord 6, then chord 4, then chord 5 sus, and then chord 5. So chord 1, well, that's nice and simple. You can play the same sort of stuff that you would at the end of a 2/5/1 progression, right? Then we get to chord 6. And fine, that's not in a 2/5/1, but if you didn't already know, you can kind of treat chord 6 like a chord 1 when you're soloing, because they share the same notes. But then you get to this annoying chord 4. You know, we'd kind of want a chord 2 there if everything I'm saying is actually adding up. Chord 2 would be F minor 7, right? So we'd have F, A flat, C, and E flat. But this A flat chord for our chord 4, well, that's A flat, C, and E flat. Well, hang on, that's pretty much the same notes. The only difference being that the F minor 7 has that F in the bass. And because they're so similar note-wise, when we're soloing, we can treat that just the same as a chord 2. Okay, so after that, we do have a B flat sus rather than a straight B flat chord. So it ends up being like a 2 to 5 sus rather than the 2/5, and that's not the same, right? But for the sake of argument, let's turn that B flat sus into a B flat 7 sus. And you know what? I love thick chords. Let's add a 9th in as well. And I haven't changed the quality of the chord. It's still a 5 sus, right? I've just added in some extensions because I'm a snotty jazz musician that likes thick chords. But if I just reorder these notes, well, I've got that B flat in the bass. Then I've got the F, A flat as the 7th, C is the 9th, and that E flat is that important sus 4. And that's just an F minor 7, our 2 chord, with a B flat in the bass. So once again, when we're soloing, we can just treat that the exact same as our 2 chord. And then it finally hits that straight B flat chord where it goes to chord 5 in our key of E flat, right? So this progression, which to start with looked like would be completely unrelated to 2/5/1s, well, now as a soloist, we can just think chord 1 again, and then 2, stay on 2 for that sus, and then go to the 5. Before going back to chord 1 for the start of the next verse. Don't believe me? Check this out. But what about other common chord sequences you might have come across, like the backdoor 2/5 in bars 3 to 5 of Just Friends? Well, here we've got a F minor 7, going to a B flat 7, but rather than going to the E flat major 7 you'd expect, it actually goes up to a C major 7. Well, the 2/5 part of that chord progression, the F minor 7, B flat 7, we can treat that as we normally would. We've just got to resolve it a little bit differently so it hits the C major 7 notes rather than the E flat 7 notes. So in this case, I hit the B natural rather than the B flat, or if my line wanted to resolve to the E flat, I'd resolve to an E natural instead. It genuinely is that simple. Now, a lot of pop songs, club classics, and jazz standards do rely on vamps, one or two chords that go round and round for ages. Beyoncé's Cozy, for example, sticks on G minor for the whole song. Surely knowing how to play on 2-5-1s won't actually help us solo on these songs, right? Well, you guessed it, it actually will. We can use a cheeky little 2-5-1 to add a bit of colour into our solo. If we take the actual chord, G minor, and treat that as our chord 1, and then we as the soloist will play over a 2-5 before that. So we would be playing over a A minor 7, D7, G minor, or you might want A minor 7 flat 5 because it is a minor 2-5-1. But the important thing is that we as soloists will be playing those chords where the band are still sticking on that G minor vamp. And doing this, which is pretty simple once you got your 2-5-1s down, adds a lovely moment of colour and a sense of harmonic direction and resolution to solos that can otherwise sound just a little bit static. So we know that as improvisers, we only need to get good at 2-5-1s and then we're all set. But how can we actually master them? Well, for that, check out this video next.